A viewer recently brought up a good scenario. What if members who are on the shelf form their own family? And for those unfamiliar, being put on the shelf equates to losing your status as a member and is basically the same as being placed on the pay me no mind list. My initial response was that years ago, something like this happening would have serious consequences. But this doesn't hold true to present day, so I thought I'd go into a more in-depth explanation. There were plenty of members on the shelf, all from various families, for one reason or another. Some of those decisions were warranted, while others can be deemed unjustified. And as per the rules, other members are not permitted to have anything to do with the person that's on the shelf. A rule that's commonly broken. Think about it. You may have a guy in your crew who you're friendly with, or even a guy you grew up with, or a member of another family who you're close to. And now this person gets shelved, and you're expected to cease all contact with him. Easier said than done, right? Nonetheless, being on the shelf is indeed serious. And what gets lost on a lot of people is that status is the alternative to killing the person. Many years ago, there were guys who were shelved, but it was rare. The mob dealt with violators much differently. Today, shelving a member is the preferred method. And not everyone is so welcoming to that shelved member. As a matter of fact, some people take advantage of it. Like for instance, when the Gambinos shelved Ernie Grillo years ago, certain people decided to use his status as a non-member to assault him. And this wasn't no simple beating. It was a vicious assault. I've personally seen his injuries, and let me just say, a few centimeters either way, and he would have lost an eye. One of the gashes he received went from his forehead down his entire face and ended at his neck. Luckily for him, these were only superficial wounds that required no stitches. This time frame when Ernie was on the shelf was extremely difficult for him. I remember that he tried to act normal, but definitely wasn't himself. During that time, Blaze Carrazzo had told me that he heard I was around Ernie in Staten Island a lot and said, "You're probably around him because you want to get straightened out." And my answer was something to the effect of, "No, I'm around him because he's my friend." Let's not forget, Ernie at the time was shelved, and if my intentions was to be straightened out, he was the last person who could have helped me, as he was considered persona non grata as far as the mob was concerned. I remember going to a wake on Staten Island with Ernie during this time, and there were a lot of guys in attendance. Some kept their distance, and others greeted him, such as Frankie Camuso, a Gambino captain, which says a great deal about his character. Despite Ernie being on the shelf, he still showed him respect, and I never forgot that about Frankie. I always liked him and found him to be very respectful. The Gambinos also shelved a guy named Mario Casarino, and the reasoning was for allegedly attempting suicide while in prison over marital issues. There were many members who were shelved for what's called taking a bad plea, which basically means the person admitted to being a member of organized crime. For example, the first time I met Michael Perna, we couldn't properly be introduced because he was on the shelf for taking a bad plea, and he was eventually taken off the shelf. Yes, a person could be taken off the shelf. Usually this takes place when the issue that put him on the shelf is revisited. In more cases than not, this takes place when there's a leadership change, as was the case with Michael Perna. The Vic and Gas administration shelved him, and that decision was overturned. I've said this many times in the past. One of the things I respected most about Mikey DeSantis is as soon as he stepped into the acting boss position, he revisited all the members who were on the shelf. As a result, many were reinstated, and some remained where they were. He was able to do this with everyone but Frankie Lastarino, who Vic personally placed on the shelf and wanted him to remain there indefinitely, which wound up being the case as Frankie died a shelf member of the Lucchese family. According to what Frankie told me, he was on the shelf essentially for following orders. Let's think about that for a moment, because it defines the mob. They break the rules, but if you break a rule, you're no good. But over and above that, if you follow the rules, as Frankie did, you're also no good. Let me put that into simple terms. You're good if the mob says you're good, but when it's convenient, at any time, you can be deemed no good. There's a saying in the street, a wise guy's never wrong. That mentality is one the mob takes to a higher level, in which they believe, even when they're blatantly in the wrong, because of who they are, they're right. Maybe that's the case in the small world they exist in. However, we live in a much larger, more rational and logical world, one void of mob mentalities. In my opinion, one of the greatest injustices when it came to shelving someone was when the Bananos put Joe Camerano on the shelf. As many people know, Joe was that family's former acting boss. And I know I'm biased when it comes to Joe, but for good reason. During my time, the Bonanno family was on the Lucchese shit list in a major way. A lot had taken place, coupled with outright disrespect. This was all reversed due to the credit of Joe. Not only was he seasoned in that life, but well schooled by his father, Joe Saunders, a former underboss in the family. It was Joe who diplomatically set things right with the Lucchese family. He operated as a class act and always conducted himself as a gentleman. Politics are part of that life. It comes with the territory. But politics, or a difference of opinions, should never come before the good of a family. When the Bonanno leadership decided to shelve Joe, they didn't hurt Joe, but caused self-harm, as it was all their loss. A guy like Joe is considered an asset to any family. But as I've always said, they did him a favor. Now he could spend more quality time with the family that matters most, his own. If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and give it a thumbs up, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Also, for anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or help me to continue making them, you can donate with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. So back to the original scenario. What if Shelf members band together and form their own family? Imagine, in the world of Shelf members, you have earners, politicians, and capable guys, just like the mob. After all, they were former members. Naturally, they still have contact with their associates, so they could get things done. And let's call it the way it is. The mob can bully and threaten one Shelf member, but not a crew of them. When you remove that edge, the scenario drastically changes. The odds are leveled. If former members, the outcast of the mob, so to speak, crewed up, who could stop them? The motto would be, you threaten or hurt one of ours, we respond with the same. Nobody in today's climate is looking for a war. Trust me. One very good example of this type of pushback, and one the mob's not accustomed to, is what took place at a Long Island funeral home in July 2022 for Bonanno Captain Vito Grimaldi, who happened to be the father-in-law of Joe C. Bonanno members showed up at the funeral home and, in view of women and children, assaulted Joe, and they banked on that no one would dare get involved. They were horribly mistaken, as they rightfully got their asses handed to them. So with that stated, the correct answer to this scenario is if Shelf members formed a family, they'd be a threat to their equals, the former families they once belonged to.